Welcome to Tellypathic, your visit to the world of episodic telly with a strong backbone of Star Trek. We're your two hosts who are mad about telly, Mark and Gary. Hi, Gary.
Hey Mark, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. So this is episode 10, and we are taking the training wheels off, aren't we?
That's it. We're
No
going off
more.
rails.
I'm going to say, I nearly said no more Star Trek. That is not true. That is
That's not
definitely
true.
true. No,
No, no, no.
but we are. This is our first episode that isn't Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
Seems right for episode 10, I think. Episode 10. And and I can see like episode 20, we're going to try and find something maybe exotic, a bit more exotic in terms of TV episodes and so on. We'll
Yeah,
see how
yeah.
we go. We'll see how we go. So this one's my choice. Do you want me to talk about this or do you want to do it?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, man. Yeah, so,
Okay, okay. Well, I mean,
yeah, this is your
summarize.
thing. You're
I
all
meant
about it.
more like summarize the episode. Right. So this is the X Files episode 3 from season 1 called Squeeze. I'll talk a little why I picked this one specifically in a bit, but the synopsis is some serial killer appears to be murdering people and ripping out their liver, but it seems to happen in closed rooms which are locked from the inside, and no one can figure out what's going on. Um, Dana Scully, a colleague of Dana Scully who's working on it, he's a rising star and he's interested in her, but he kind of can't help but make fun of the fact she's been involved with Spooky Mulder and in the X Files. But even so, because of how good she was at the Academy, he's asked her to sort of take a look. I think it's really a backdoor. He does want Spooky Mulder to have a look because Fox Mulder's pretty brilliant. Is how he's portrayed in this universe. Um, but when they start looking in, they get to a suspect really quickly, don't they? Really quickly.
Yeah.
But it just checks out in terms of rational, usual thinking that is story checks and so on. And what Mulder starts talking about just sounds crazy, and he just annoys everyone. So they don't want him on the case. But it is got an X-File precedent, so they can't just boot him off because there is actually a sort of an X-File precedent for this case. So they were there first, in effect. Um, so this goes on. They find the suspect. They kind of think they know who he is, but the regular guys are not going along with it. But they manage to track down his location and find a bizarre nest. Um, but because they can't get anything on him, basically he decides his next victim is going to be Scully. And Mulder clicks onto this, and then it's a race for time. Scully does get attacked, but she manages to fend him off, and between them, they manage to actually take him in, handcuff him, and then the last shot is we see. And we also, I should mention, he has unusual abilities. He can move down drain covers and sort of it appears to distort his body. Um, last,
Yeah. I
uh,
was waiting for you to get to the X-Files part of this.
yeah, yeah.
The
Well,
dude can go through vents and
yeah,
six
gosh,
inch.
yeah, and it ends with him looking at the vent that is on the door of his cell, and so it ends. Okay, that's probably it, and an interesting episode in many ways, and one of the few that's actually got a sequel. And I don't mean a
True.
two-parter, I mean a sequel
A
later on,
sequel.
a
Yeah,
sequel
yeah.
which is in many ways as good. I picked this one because I know how iconic it is to the success of the X Files and also Gillian Anderson somewhat. Um, though
Yeah.
Gillian Anderson always had trouble. The producers, Chris Carter always believed in her, but the execs, not the producers, the execs was not convinced of her ability to carry this role. Why they came to that conclusion, even based on like the first episode, the second episode, never mind this one, is I do not know. I cannot
Yeah.
understand it.
Me
But
neither. Yeah.
she did
That's
consolidate it with this and other episodes, particularly a brilliant episode called Beyond the Sea with Brad Dourif, is the one where they must have thought to themselves, nah, we can't really get rid of her. Um, so there is that, right? But the reason this one's so important is people were talking about this show when it was first aired, right? First one or two episodes, like, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, you should try and give it a watch. But I tell you, everyone was talking about this episode. It was kind of the same way Twin Peaks episode 3. Everyone was
Yeah.
talking about it, right? This
Mm.
is the one where they're not doing aliens, right? First episode, second episode, aliens. So it looks like it's a show about aliens. This wasn't about aliens. This is a much more supernatural or unusual or weird sort of out there thing, and
Yeah.
help define the X Files. That's why it's so important, and it's a great
Interesting.
episode, right? It's a great episode. Um, right. So let's talk about this. I watched it when it first aired. Always liked it. I was primed
Yeah.
to enjoy this. There are a number of shows I'd watched before this that were can be seen as precursors, forerunners to the X Files, right? And I
Yeah.
like them. Some of them I hadn't seen, right, or I'd seen occasional ones, so I was aware of them. But there was some shows specifically sets you up to be a fan of the X Files, so it totally worked. How
Yeah.
did you come to it?
So I came to it from you. Um, so I'd always seen the odd episode, it was on the telly and stuff, but obviously never watched it as a kid, really. And obviously I've known yourself for what, 10 years, maybe more
Yeah,
than that
yeah,
now,
yeah.
something like
10
that.
years, yeah.
And obviously you've written a book about it. You've
Yeah.
you've got you've got multiple podcasts about it. You talked about the X Files, and you at work were like, "This is the greatest show of all time." And I was like, I'd heard of it, um, but I'd never gone to the effort to go and watch like this sort of TV show.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'll check it out. I'll check it out. And I sat and watched the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't
um,
blame you. I've only
yeah.
ever watched it all the way through once.
Yes.
I.e., I've watched every single episode at least once, right?
Yep.
First 4 seasons I've watched multiple times. Just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you
Must be
start, you
so.
intend to
Yeah.
cram, right? But I do like the later ones. That's not the issue is not, I didn't get through them. It's just because I like to cram. So I watch them from the beginning. But I've got other projects and stuff like that. I will
Yeah. Yeah.
mention, as you said, I had a podcast about this with Becky Booth.
Right.
And it was called the X
Yep.
Files. X Files. We discontinued early season 4 because Becky just couldn't, for various reasons, couldn't sort of keep up with the schedule. And I did not want to continue that show with anyone else. I specifically liked the way we dealt with it. So I felt it was either, put it to rest, or if Becky ever returns, we will restart it. But that particular podcast is no more for the time being. Never say
Yeah.
never, but and it'll only be Becky and myself as the main co-hosts of that one.
Yeah.
However, we got through loads of episodes and we had a deep joy. This was, and we like some episodes you just wouldn't think is a great episode. There's one called Fire. We loved
Oh,
because it's so
it's a great
cheesy and
episode. I love that
mental.
episode too. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was one of the ones they had an actress in that who was not great, who the execs were eyeing to be the replacement for Gillian Anderson, which is
Yeah, which is
mad,
crazy, which is actually
madness,
insane. Yeah.
absolute madness.
Yeah.
But so in case she's listening to this, hi Becky, hope you're well. I'll let her know that we were doing this today, so she's aware of it.
Cool.
And basically loved the X Files. Always have. The shows that really for me was a precursor was probably Scooby Doo was in there. Seriously, Scooby Doo was in there. But there was one in particular called there was one show in particular called Kolchak, the Night Stalker, with
Right.
Darren McGavin, who does appear much later on as like the bloke that set up the X Files, right? Which is a great bit of continuity, and there's references to him as well in other episodes of the X Files. It's a
Yep.
great show, and indeed, this particular episode has a strong reference to these because that series started with like a TV movie that was like an absolute smash called The Night Stalker.
Right.
And they made a sequel film called The Night Strangler, and then they made a TV series of 20 episodes, right?
Interesting.
This particular episode really relates strongly to The Night Strangler and another one off episode, which I can't remember the name of. I think it was called The Ripper. And both of those stories are really similar to what's going on here. The other one that this really feels similar to is It, right? And a
There's a
shot.
reference, a
There's a
direct reference at
shot
the
to
start. Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but also the fact that some monstrous thing is dormant for 30 years and then comes back.
Mm,
That's Pennywise, right?
yep.
And there's a few other precedents. I think the old British show The Avengers with Steed and Emma Peel are a reference point
Right.
as well. And another show from the 60s called The Invaders, where a bloke was on the run because he worked out these aliens were sort of controlling things, and he was on the run. He's basically Fox Mulder, but without an FBI training, right?
Right. No, never,
That
never seen
character.
that. Never
Yeah,
seen that.
an interesting way. It's very 60s, you know. It's very 60s,
Hmm.
brightly lit and all that kind of business.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah. Yes. The other thing about this show and earlier episodes is how cinematic it is in terms of lighting and how it looks.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't the first show to do that. Twin Peaks was, well, even Twin Peaks wasn't the first show that was doing that. I think probably you could argue things like Hill Street Blues and definitely Miami Vice was where TV started swerving into being more cinematic and filmic.
Mm,
Um, but the X
yeah.
Files was very strong. It made good use of shadows, for example, right?
Yeah.
So
And I think, yeah, it's perfect for this podcast, right? Like
yeah.
episodic telly. When you say episodic telly, X Files is on that list every time.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, and
you know,
like
it
you
does
say,
have a through story, but I guess you would definitely say it's episodic. Yeah.
yeah, I'd say a third of the episodes are the long arc, right? They have
Hmm.
this sort of link, but
Yeah.
then there's a number of monster. There's probably about, if you really rationalize it, there's probably like 4 or 5 types of X Files episode, and I'm not
Yep.
going to get into it, but this is classic Monster of the Week.
Classic Monster of the Week. Yeah, not extraterrestrial Monster of the
Wow,
Week. And
Monster of the
like
Week.
you said, this is the first hit in season one that's like this is more horror slash like you say, Monster of the Week than just aliens and mystery and what are we alone, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
This is the first episode that's like left field. Actually, this is murder. Yeah, it's
this
it's
is some
really cool.
dark
It's
shit.
it's really cool.
It's
Yeah.
some dark shit. I also like, and this is also the first. And I said there was subcategories of X Files. Specifically, this is a subcategory this could fit in is endangered in your own home, and that's a thing in the X Files as well. There are several episodes throughout the main seasons where there's that. But this is you aren't safe in your own home kind of episode, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and
This is
that, um,
attacking the audience, right?
yes,
Oh, by the way, all your security systems that you have wouldn't keep you safe from something like this. Yeah.
yeah. One of the things also like about this episode, and we haven't even talked about the story much, is
We'll get
how
into it.
well it conveys the character of Mulder and Scully and their relationship. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
early
this is only
relationship, right?
episode. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
only episode 3, but it's there. He's, and it is funny that he's still. He likes her, but he just cannot keep his mouth shut of what he believes. It just shows he doesn't really care what people think, and he
Yeah,
likes to mess with them, even, right?
yeah. It reminds, I think what I like about the early Mulder in particular is you can tell that he's had this shit for years. He's been saying these theories and these guys don't believe him. They shoot him down. They don't open their mind to the possibility of things. And you can tell he's had it for years and he's almost vindictive about it. And it's
Yeah,
not until later on that Scully kind of helps him to navigate that a little bit better.
yeah,
But at the start, like you say, he just goes off on one and Scully's like, you knew those guys didn't believe you, but you pushed them anyway. And he's like, well, yeah, they had to know.
yeah.
He's got that like
Well,
he's
he
not
says a
quite.
phrase. What was his phrase? Something like the desire to mess with their heads overcomes the weight of humiliation, or something like
Yeah,
that,
exactly. Yeah, he hasn't
right?
quite learned to hold it back yet, which is fun. I like
No,
that.
I like that too. Yeah. Um, and that, one of the things about the early seasons of the X Files, and actually, I'm not sure it's just the early seasons. Occasionally, quite often, they'll get some of the acting is not great from the one-off episode cast, and they
Right,
weren't great
right.
here, but it's kind of carried by Mulder and Scully, right?
Yeah, and Toombs.
Yeah, Toombs
He's
is a
he's
scary
scary,
dude.
man.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah.
scary dude, man.
He's a
Yeah.
scary dude. Not a really nice person in real life, Doug Hutchison, for various reasons. However,
Right.
he's very effective in some things he's in. He was in the Green Mile, for example, as the
Yeah.
shit hill
Yeah.
guard. Good in that. But this is his, you know, if you think that Doug Hutchison is Toombs, he is Toombs. It's really hard to imagine
Yeah.
anyone else being as good. Um,
Yeah. I think the thing about his performance is he really does a really good job of at first you're like that sociopath like blending in, pretending to be a person. But the more you watch him, you're like, man, this isn't a human. He really sells that performance of this is he's not human.
yeah,
He may
yeah.
look and sort of sound like a human, but he ain't. I
Yeah,
think that's really impressive.
I think it's quite impressive. They give him very little dialogue.
Yeah, he doesn't say much.
It's
Yeah,
just
that's
the
right. It's just
lie detector's the only point we see him talking, right? And he's just
uh,
answering,
yeah,
one word answers in that. No, yes, we don't have him talking apart from near the end. We get a sort of bestial scream. We really don't, and he's quite unresponsive, right? It's almost
yeah.
like he's
It's
shutting
all in
down.
his it's all in his like facial mannerisms, and I think it's his eyes. I don't know if they did any sort of uh like these sort of contacts or something to sort of make his eyes pop, I guess. But yeah, whatever he
Oh,
does there.
he was definitely wearing contacts at points because his eyes were almost orange, glowing. Not
Mm,
glowing, but almost
not
orange.
glowing, yeah.
They were a different color. They were a different color when he was inflamed. Let's put it that way.
Mm,
When he was ready to kill. Um,
yeah.
it's kind of good. I mean, one of the only thing that it always gives me a chuckle when I watch the episodes is that first scene where he somehow can unscrew the vent from the other side, which is not possible. Uh, you just can't do
Yeah.
that.
The
So
the
it's
only
kind of
the
a
only
bit
thing I
silly.
thought about that is obviously like it's implied that he can stretch his form, right?
Yeah.
As so I guess if you think about it, he could stretch his fingers through the grates and like twist it from the normal side, but his fingers are so long, right? He could stretch around it.
Well, possibly,
But you
but
couldn't but you couldn't show that in
nah.
what year is this?
It's
Uh
93. 93.
93, right? So they're not doing that. Um,
Yeah.
and they were like, what? And it's creepy. It is creepy the way that they sort of
Yes.
scring out and then drop onto the floor. And then when he leaves, you can just see them getting screwed back. Like it's a clever shot.
Yeah.
Uh,
It is
but yeah, your
clever,
brain
but
kind of
it
just
doesn't
fills in the
work. It
slots.
doesn't work. It
Yeah.
wouldn't realistically work. But however, you're carried along by the episode, and indeed, it gives Mulder the first hint of something, doesn't it? Because he sees basically a filing on the floor underneath the vent.
Yeah.
A metal filing suggesting a screw has been undone. Right?
Which did also annoy me a little bit because it's like, you know, they're like federal agents, right?
Yeah,
So
don't pick
they're
up evidence, do
the
you?
cream of the crop in terms of police investigation, and these guys are specifically a homicide squad, right?
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, there's just evidence that they've missed that Mulder immediately sees. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll just ignore that.
Yeah. One
Guess
thing
it could
that's
happen.
always interesting about this episode, it's quite jarring, is the first scene after the credits is Dana talking to her old colleague, and he mentions the Twin Towers bombing. Did you not catch that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
which is weird because obviously 9/11 didn't happen for 8 more years after this.
yeah.
Obviously, they're talking about an earlier incident where I think a van was drawn in onto the sort of forecourt and blew up. Um,
Mm.
but it's kind of a bit jarring when you're watching the episode. And if you're not familiar with when it was made, you would assume it was after 9/11, wouldn't you?
They were talking about
Yes.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. because it just fits in. Um,
Yeah, I liked the FBI patter in this episode. It felt very real. You know, they're talking about getting up the ladder. They were talking about co-workers who had solved cases that weren't very good, but they had sort of lucked out and got promotions.
yeah,
And
they
they're, you
were.
know,
It was a bitching session, wasn't it, for people to came up together, basically.
yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, I liked the way that he was trying to help. He was trying to help Scully by like saying, "Yeah, you know, get out of the basement. You don't want to hang out with those X-Files pieces." And it's a good because obviously a lot of the X-Files we're from Scully's perspective, right? And
yeah,
we're skeptically looking at these cases from almost her perspective.
yeah,
Not always, but like generally speaking, right? It's her dictation sometimes and stuff like that. And we're trying to piece together whether what we saw is extraterrestrial, right, or strange,
yeah,
as long with her. And yeah, it's interesting that this episode is like her healing the ground. Like, no, I want to be here.
yeah,
You know, she
yeah.
stands with Mulder. Like, this is yeah, I like that. I like that. That was a nice
I
nice
like
moment.
I like the fact they're always kind of various people keep making fun of him, but sometimes he just lets it go, and so does Scully, right? But sometimes he bites back. You know, he says, "We see no little green men here." Mulder he goes, "Grey." He goes,
Yeah,
"What?"
instantly trolls him.
He says, "Yeah, they got an iron shortage. So, do you know how much liver and onions goes for in so and so?"
Yeah, in some alien rebellion or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
madness.
Yeah, it's just trolling people. It's fun. It's funny. I always thought that. I mean, I don't think Duchovny's the greatest actor, but he is perfect as Fox Mulder. And
I like
Anderson's
him. Yeah, I
Anderson's.
really like him.
Yeah, she's a much better actor though. But it's just a really great sort of chemistry between the two, and
Yeah,
it works really well.
they're the perfect like cop buddy team. They just work really well, and like the personality of Mulder works really well against the like strict. It just works like the straight cop and then the not so straight cop. Like that's a great dynamic.
Yeah,
That's always worked, and they play off each other really well. There's like sort of flirtatiousness about it, the relationship, which gets explored later, but kind of
yeah.
not, which
But
is
you also
great. All of the great stuff that keeps the audience engaged. And they're funny. They actually are funny.
there is some funny lines. There definitely are, yeah. And
Yeah.
and yeah, they're charming. It's kind of pleasant. It's a bit like Star Trek, right? It's just a pleasure to. Even the
And
bad episodes, there's a pleasure in just watching people you like do stuff, right?
yeah, and it
Um,
holds up. Like it's we're watching this in what 2025, right?
yeah.
But that sort of relationship and pattern, it's none of it's dated.
No,
It's
the
yeah,
relation between them never dates. What does feel
yeah.
odd? Not odd. What does put it in its time place is sometimes Scully has to deal with sexism, and I think she's also quite young in dealing with like sort of patronising older agents as well. You know, stuff like that.
Oh,
Um,
brother, I think that still happens, to be
oh,
honest.
I agree. I agree, but it's you know it's not. It's more like well, all right, okay, yeah. Let's just go with that. um, um, yeah. There's also some great creepy shots in this of basically close-ups of Tomb's face in shadow and just focusing on his eyes, and
Oh man, yeah.
it
The
starts with
st-
him looking from the sewer, right? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
The it shot where his eyes are barely in view. Like they're so obscured. I don't
And
know
they're
how they
just
did the shot.
shining. They're just shining, aren't they? Well, they
Yeah,
must have fired bright lights at him
but it's
or
tough to get
something.
like just his like front of his face and not his sides or his ears or anything like that. I don't
Yeah,
know how they did it. I'm not any of the sort of I'm not into like FX or anything. But they yeah, it was a fantastic shot. It was creepy.
yeah,
Comes out of the much better than it did it, in my opinion.
yeah,
Which is a
yeah,
hot take, but I thought it
yeah.
was much better than how it did it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also like the fact they find these weird elongated fingerprints at crime scenes, and you know Mulder does a few taps on the computer, and suddenly it scales and matches, and it's like, yeah, that don't happen.
Yeah.
That don't
Yeah, that wouldn't happen.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was
uh,
always the same elongated fingerprint. I'm like, if he can morph into almost any shape, presumably,
yeah.
why would it always be the same? Anyway,
Yeah,
Uh,
it's kind of goofy. I like the also fact that there's the montage where they're looking through film reels. Sorry, library. Um, I can't
oh
remember the
yeah,
word.
those machines. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I know the machines you mean. Yeah, those scanning machines. Because he even says, "Oh, they make me seasick. Have you
yeah.
got
If
any?"
you got, have you got any
I don't
whatever it
know
was,
what it was. Yeah,
Tylenol or something? I don't know what it was. They make him
but I
see
guess
sick.
that must still be relevant because even though we've got like scans of newspapers and
Yeah,
whatever, I imagine somebody somewhere is still having to do that kind of investigation.
yeah,
Maybe if
I
you're looking
used
that
to
far
do that
back.
when I used to do research. You have to look through microfiches of old papers, and it is a bit headachy inducing, even without the swirly, nonsense as you're zipping through stuff. So I kind of get it. I do like the fact that we get Scully doing proper FBI work, writing a far an analysis of the
Oh, a
personality
report.
type, and
Oh, I love that.
and that's
Yeah,
how they get down to him so quickly, isn't it? Because if a victim's been sort of foiled, they sometimes revisit the scene of previous crimes to try and capture the essence to help them deal with the fact that they haven't managed to succeed.
yeah.
And we also know from what Mulder says that this guy does 5 murders every 30 years and he's still got like some left or one left.
Well, he's guessing, right? At that point, he knows he's seen the pattern, and he's gone and looked back at X Files, which the other agents haven't even considered, which is
Yeah.
murders that happened in 1903, 1933,
1933,
1963,
1963,
and
1993.
then
Yeah.
93. Yeah, and he's like, a 1903, I think he says, is the first time that we were even using fingerprint
Fingerprinting.
scanning.
Yeah, yeah.
So who's to say? And he looks back
How
and he
long
was
is
like,
it? Yeah.
yeah, he was like, oh, there was a liver removal murder, and she's like, of course there was.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's
Standard.
cool.
Yeah, so yeah, it's so reminiscent of Pennywise, that the pattern in Pennywise in it
Yeah,
of dormancy and emerging again. And indeed, as I mentioned, this was kind of really similar to the Night Strangler. That was about liver removal as well, and being dormant for so many years. Or
yeah.
maybe
I
it
was
was about liver.
wondering,
Yeah,
was there, like you get that old horror story of like people waking up with their organs have been like removed and stuff. Was that like a horror thing that was prevalent at the time?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a
Yeah,
urban legend, right? You wake up in a
yeah, yeah.
bath of ice with your back hurting, right, and your
Yeah,
kidney
exactly. Yeah, I
that
wondered.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was, yeah. It's I kind of like the lie detector test where um they have to raise it because it's such a weird question. Something about 1903. Were you at this site and things like that? And one of the guys goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
that must be just a control question." And Mulder's like, "No, I asked him to ask that." Um,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah. Are you over
what?
100 years old?
Yeah, but it's so
Yeah.
weird because they go on about the lie detector. He goes, "No, he passed." But they asked him, "Were you at this murder scene?" No. And I don't comment on that. The fact he passed that bit, they say, "Oh no, he lied on this one," where he says, "Are you over 100 years old? Were you at this site, which was the site of the murders in the 30s, I think, and things like that."
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It seems so. I also
Yeah. The
like
polygraph was odd. I want to comment on that because I believe as long as the polygraph has existed, it's never been used as hard evidence. It's always like an indication or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
But
But
yeah, they
I'm
just
not
let him
entirely
go.
sure. I'm not
They
entirely
just let
sure.
him. They're just like, yeah, no, he passed the polygraph. Send him out.
Yeah, it's got a good reason for being in events. What, at 9 o'clock at night? I said, yeah, but
He's
one of
being
our civil
proactive.
servants
Yeah,
wants to
what?
work really hard, and we busted him. And the boss is getting really shirty about it. And all this.
Yeah, I thought it was
Uh,
interesting. Like, I get it. I thought what they were going to do, though, initially was that they were going to capture him early and then he was going to escape because they didn't account for the
now
fact that the
this
dude
is
can slip through bars, but they
too
never go for
clever.
that.
Too clever. They go for we catch him early, and no one believes us. So we have to
Yeah,
let
yeah.
him
No one
go.
believes it's possible. Yeah.
So we got to kind of watch him, and it's kind of interesting that he's. He's just one thing about Toombs. He's played really well. He's very passive, isn't he? He doesn't really react unless he's about to do the kill, right? And then he's much more
Mm.
active and bestial. But he's. I like the fact even when once they caught him, he just went passive, didn't he? As soon as he was handcuffed and realised he couldn't get away, he just. It's almost like a deflating balloon. Watching a deflating balloon. It was
Yeah,
really interestingly
I
played.
guess it's similar to like a wild predator, right? Like
Like a big
after
cat.
the hunt, yeah, they kind of do kind of just flop about, right? Like they just kind of
Yeah,
chill.
well, usually because
Like
they've
they don't
eaten.
stay on it the whole time, do they? But I guess
No, no. But it's more like he's not right. Obviously he's not right, but you know,
Mm.
it's more like that. Um, I'm trying to think. One. I want to go back on the X Files generally. One of
Okay.
some of the stuff about it generally. I mean, the show's got a lot of sort of iconography about it. It's got some memorable memes, much like Twin Peaks or Star Trek, right? Red shirts in Star Trek and music, Captain Kirk, all that.
Yeah.
X Files Scott, Mulder and Scully. But if you go to sort of more generic, there's the thing think about is the moody lighting, the coats with the big shoulder pads, long coats with
Yeah.
shoulder pads,
Mhm.
torches. Oh, I love a torch
Yeah.
scene. Torches into that, which isn't in
Torches.
this episode, is it? Or is
Yeah, the
no?
torch beams specifically, all right? Torch
Yeah, yeah,
beams in like a
yeah.
dark
So that's
corridor.
right. Yeah, there's some great stuff with that. Um,
And the theme song, right? The
Yeah,
theme song.
the
Everybody knows
music,
the
the
X-Files
music.
theme song.
Yeah,
Even
now,
people who haven't seen it know the X-Files theme
yeah,
song.
and it kind of supplanted the Twilight Zone music when people want to see something spooky. That instead of going do do
Oh,
do do do,
yeah.
they'll go do 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 do.
It's true, true.
And
Yeah,
it's a great piece of music. Now that
it is.
music, Chris Carter, when he sort of was developing the show, he actually talked to Mark Snow, the composer, and said, "I want it to sound like this," and he referred to the Smiths song. How what's it? How soon is now, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what it was getting at is that swirly, expansive guitar sound. I think I
It's that
assume
weird
there's
sound in it,
yeah
right? Yeah.
that really great guitar sound. But Mark Snow didn't quite go that way. And
Nope.
if you continue listening to the song, right at the end, there's a bit where Morrissey, I presume it's Morrissey, he's just laughing. He goes, ha 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 ha, or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
and that's what inspired the do 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 do, which is
It's crazy.
amazing. Chris
It
Carter,
is.
but it works. It totally works.
It does.
And the moody credits, with the truth is out there. Or sometimes the message changes, doesn't it?
It
How the
does.
line, what's
Yeah.
it? Sometimes that message changes, but it totally works. Mark Snow did a great job there, and obviously there's a big library of music as the season developed, which they reuse musical cues. Every series
Hmm.
does it. Star Trek is famous for that sort of thing. The '60s
Hmm.
Star Trek, I'm talking about, but all of them do. But
Yeah.
uh,
Was it sticks in my head? The red right hand. Um.
what the glowing finger,
Yeah. Yeah.
all
It's a
that.
classic.
Yeah. Yeah, it just it sets you up, it puts you in the space, doesn't it? That pre-credit sequence of something. Oh, what's going on here? And then that music starts, puts you in the right space, which
Yeah.
is the
It's
job
excellent.
of a theme tune, right? It's to prime you to be
And
ready.
and the closing, right? So,
Mm.
um, X-Files does this great thing. Not always, but most times it fades to black with the silent director credits.
Yeah, it's
Um,
usually showing something to indicate it's not over, but not
it's not
always.
over, or yeah, it's usually an ominous ending generally, but not always. Sometimes it is like a oh thank God, like a relief ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, it always fades to black with the types letters for the the typewriter letters font. I don't know quite how else to describe it.
Yeah, Times New Roman kind of font, right?
Yeah, it always has impact, those
Yeah.
final credits, and the silence is deafening sometimes, which is awesome.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
but
they
yeah.
use it well. They use it well. It always strikes me as like, did they just get really lucky with the initial casting, or were they really good casting calls? Probably the latter, or a bit of both.
I think it's like all things great in telly and in movies, right? I think it is a bit of luck.
Yeah,
You think about Back to the Future and like you think about Terminator could have been a different person. Yeah, Eric Stoltz could have been, you think about all that stuff and it's like the way it landed though was beautiful. And like
yeah,
the some of the mistakes that happened that you leave in because it just works. All those things that create a thing that everyone loves. I
yeah.
think it's a bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an iconic show. It's one of the things I do really like about the X-Files is how elastic it is, right? When you used to sit down, it's a bit like Star Trek, and it's the same thing. Great shows, right? And there's probably other shows which great shows that can kind of do this, which is when you sit down, you never know what you're going to get. So it could be a comedy episode, or it could be a
Exactly.
horror episode, it could be a straight thriller episode, or it could be a mix of both, and you're never
Exactly.
sure. You're never sure.
And
Uh,
that is why I could never stop watching this
yeah,
show.
yeah,
I guess it's sort of similar for Star Trek, but in a kind of different way. Like, I think it's why I love episodic TV and why I generally gripe about modern TV because we've definitely moved away from the episodic feel
yeah,
in modern TV recently. But yeah, it draws me in. I'm like, what's going to happen? Where are we going this time? And X Files is no different. X Files is incredible because it has such range.
yeah.
Um,
It's got a great
yeah,
ebb and flow. Again, the best shows have a good ebb and flow. Shows which struggle have always are ones where they're trying to say, "Well, we got to make it even better next, or we got to raise the odds even more next week."
yeah, the stakes go up. By the end of
Yeah,
season one, the
it's
world's in
ridiculous.
danger,
Yeah, it's
and then in
ridiculous.
season two, it's the world again. It's the MacGuffin. Is
It's
it
multiple universes and so on and so on. I mean,
yeah, it just
Doctor
gets
Who's,
more and more crazy.
for example, has suffered recently from this, that it just keeps trying to escalate the odds. It's like, play it back, guys. It doesn't have to be about the end of every single universe ever. It could be about one person
Yeah,
being endangered. That's fine for a piece of travel. Um,
yeah,
and, and good shows kind of do that. And the X Files is one of those. It's just a beauty to the X Files, basically. It just
yeah,
it just even the shit. I mean, and there are bad episodes. There are, I'd say, in each episode of the X Files, there's probably three terrible episodes and three or four
mm,
absolute bangers, and the rest are okay, or good, And we're talking at a high standard here. X Files, a good episode here is the X Files. It's better than 99% of other telly, I'd say.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
When
Um,
people say they haven't seen the X Files, I'm always like, you should watch it, and they go, "Oh, isn't it kind of old now?" And I'm like, it holds up. It holds up.
it
Like, yeah,
does.
like, you're using landlines and stuff like that. They don't have mobile phones and smartphones. Like, the investigation would definitely be easier today, right?
Yeah,
But it hits that perfect line, like that 90s thing where investigation is trickier. It is a little harder to get things, but they do have modern technology in the sense of, being able to do fingerprinting and DNA tracing and but it's just it's that perfect detective interest, like interestingness around trying to solve something, which
yeah,
can't just be waved away by a piece of magic that we've built as from technology perspective. It's always like you've got to go and talk to people. You've got to go and swab the floor and things like that. You've got to sit in front of those library computers, and
yeah,
X Files does a great job of showing the grunt work of investigation, the mundaneness of it, I guess, against the supernatural that we're investigating. It's kind of a great juxtaposition.
yeah.
Um,
I also,
and
I
this
mean,
episode did.
yeah, yeah. It's terrific. I like also the fact the early seasons. Well, it shows us. Scully trying to still be part of the real world, trying to date or talking to her friends about stuff,
Yeah,
whereas Mulder's just a shut in, basically, with
completely.
a
Yeah,
pornography collection.
yeah,
That's
yeah. That's
and
right.
and
That's
he
the
hasn't
joke.
even got a bed at home. He sleeps on his couch. Right? Is kind of that's him. That's Mulder. Um,
Yeah,
and I think this is probably the first big drama where mobile phones were significant in that they were just used. Um,
right.
I mean, they were just coming out. Cell phones were just becoming a thing in the 90s, and they were still uncommon. So if you had one, it was like, ooh, it's like,
Yeah.
uh, whereas, yeah, now it's,
Yeah. And the other
um,
thing, sorry, yeah, the other thing that's sort of jumping off your point there is the fun thing about the X-Files is because we're doing the X-Files and we're in the basement with Mulder and Scully, they're kind of not that well funded. It's like, yeah, you guys are FBI, but like you're like the low class. They're sort of treated as
yeah, yeah,
shutouts, right? So they don't have all the resources that you might expect, and kind of nobody wants to help them. They're like, you guys, now I don't want to be associated with you. Just get on with your own thing
yeah.
and get
It's
out of our
like
way.
when they need help, they have to go somewhere else. And that brings in some great side characters like the lone gunman, right?
Yes,
Just
which we'll
cropping
definitely
up.
talk about later. Yeah,
Love the Lone Gunman show. Actually,
yeah,
it's
and they
it's
set.
the fun end of the X Files, and it isn't aliens and it's conspiracies, but it's not aliens and mutants and monsters. It's more like comedy thrillers. It's a really fun light show. Chris Carr actually said the Lone Gunman was one of the finest things he ever did. How about that? The series, The Lone Gunman.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's funny when Mulder needs help. That's where he goes. He doesn't go to his boss, and he doesn't later ones. Skinner sort of gets more involved when he becomes a character. But then he's got other characters like X and Deep Throat, kind of steering him as well, isn't he? Um,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah. But
which
yeah, like just going back to the Tooms episode, like yeah, they show that off really well. That's sort of yeah, the rest of the bureau is kind of laughing at Mulder.
yeah,
They just see him as a aliens guy, like a conspiracy guy, like how you've been chucked in the basement to investigate aliens. What a waste of time.
yeah.
Which is great because as an audience, we obviously know that there's there's maybe
And the
something
thing
else
is,
going
he
on.
likes it down there. To see, he likes being there and being left alone mostly.
Yeah, well, for him, he's like, well, the fool's on them, right? Like
Yeah.
they're the stupid ones. They're not seeing
Yeah,
what I'm seeing.
yeah, and
Yeah,
also we find extremely strong motivations for his sort of obsessions later on.
yeah,
That becomes apparent. That becomes revealed. But yeah, it's Tombs is just the first really good episode. I'd say I really quite like the pilot, and I quite like episode 2. But for me, Tombs is the first really strong episode, and we
it
got
is.
some absolute 10 out of 10s coming down the line in season 1 as well. There's a few which we may get to at some point. Um,
Yeah, and quite a shocking, quite a shocking episode in that,
yeah,
like you said,
horror
we
film,
went through,
right?
yeah, we went through a couple of extraterrestrial stuff. Was it aliens? Was it not aliens? And then it's like, dude getting murdered in his office. You see like that he's got like there's like a baby in a picture frame on his desk, so he's obviously
Yeah,
a
blood
dad.
everywhere.
Blood
Yeah,
everywhere. It's like, oh damn. Like if you were, going into the show blind and you were like, oh, oh, cool. What sort of weird alien stuff are we going to get this week? And then you get hit with that. Quite a shocking change of pace. And the episode kind of never really lets up. It's a homicide investigation through and through, and the weirdness sort of gets dripped in slowly, and then yeah, you obviously find out that he's really weird.
yeah. There's some really creepy moments, like for example, where they go visit the old guy that was part of the case from the 30s. Now, this guy looks way too young. He would have been 80 odd, right? But
Yeah,
he
yeah,
looks.
he's yeah,
But the fact is, he's kind of been obsessed with the case ever since. And when he sees that, he shows a photo of one of the suspects, who is Toombs we've seen now, right? A old
yes.
black and white photo of getting out of a truck. And it's like, wow, that's him. And that gets recalled right at the end of the episode, doesn't it? Where they catch him and his photos in the paper, and we see the old fella looking at the paper and start to cry.
Yeah, yeah. Which
Um,
is really cool. Yeah. Do
yeah,
you know what? Do you know what annoys me about this? Have you ever
what?
heard of a thing called SCP?
No,
It's this containment breach protocol thing that people write on the internet, and you write a monster, right? And it's about how you would contain it. and how
Yeah,
dangerous that monster might be. And I think about that when I see Tooms and they put him just in a cage, which is, I think it looks like a mental institution,
it
possibly.
does look like men.
And like you see, there's like bars on the windows, and I'm like, they didn't really think about this at all, did they?
No, well, they don't believe it, do they? They think it's a man.
Yeah, but
Uh,
Mulder does, right? And he stood
Mulder does,
outside,
and
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 he's like, "Oh,
Scully,
yeah,
yeah, and Scully even says, yeah, though we've done some interesting, they've done some tests on him. He's got a really interesting physiological differences from you sort of average person, but that's her only
yeah." It's
comment,
it's
really.
an always fun part of the X Files for me is like how the rest of the world moves on from the obvious at this point. Well, from the audience perspective, it seems obvious that he's supernatural in some way.
Yeah, but it's
But it's
a
like, how
mutation,
does
right? Or something. Yeah,
yeah, like how does the rest of the world just sort of palm it off as like, it's just a bit weird, but we're not going to look into it too much. To the point where, in this case, Mulder knows he's coming out after, he didn't get his fifth kill or whatever.
yeah,
Um, he knows,
he
but
knows.
he's like, well, this is the best we can do, I guess. And he just sort of leaves. I'm like, really? I guess you have to leave it somewhere. But
Oh,
yeah,
it
I
always
thought,
ends like that. Sometimes it's all about, well, that isn't really resolved. But yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Um, well, it was fun to rewatch this one. It always is, though. But I think both
yeah.
of us have seen it many times.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm excited to watch some more X Files that I haven't seen for a long time. Like I say, it's been
mm,
what, like
I'll have to have a
10
think
years.
then, because I mean, there's some really obvious ones from season one, but you probably
Oh yeah,
know them. You
I'm
know
gonna
what I mean?
pick one. I know there's one I want to talk about, which I'm not going to spoil for the audience. We'll talk about that next week. So it's going to be X Files again next week. That's a
Oh,
spoiler.
okay. Well, in that case, I will
Yeah.
mention, but I won't say what episode it is in case it's the one
Ah, yeah.
you
Okay. Cool.
are going to decide on. But I'll
Exciting.
reveal it next time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is one episode of the X Files that I would contend is the great horror film of the 90s, actually.
Right. Right.
Um, along with actually, I consider two great horror. Well, there's a lot of good horror films in the 90s, but it was a little weak compared to the 80s. So, however, I'd say this particular episode of the X Files and Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me were the two most
Mm.
significant horror films of the 90s, in my opinion. But it'd be
Yeah.
interesting. It depends which one you're going to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, what
Um,
was the other thing I was going to say? The other thing I was going to say was, if there is anyone listening who come from, just listen about Star Trek and stuff, and for some reason you've got through this episode and you haven't seen the X Files, absolutely still watch it. Like the show holds up super well.
yeah,
um,
yeah, it
and,
does.
and you, if you like Star Trek, I think it's not a far leap to say you'll enjoy X Files. I think,
Yeah.
um,
One of the things I will say about when this came out, there was very little horror TV on the telly, right? It's
right.
a bit like Star Trek Next Gen. When that came out, there was very little sci-fi, right? It kind
Yeah.
of paved the way for all of these sci-fi shows. And the X-Files, I think, paved the way for Buffy, maybe,
Oh,
and
yeah. Oh,
and stuff
100%.
like that.
Yeah.
And like Twin Peaks had its loads of rip-offs, the X-Files kind of had some rip-offs too, or people trying to sort of emulate it. But it was the X-Files that sort of dragged horror back into the possible shows that we'd see on the telly.
Yeah.
In a kind of wonderful way. But it was never kind of topped, in my opinion, in its own space. It really
Mm.
just stayed there. And I've got to be honest, I watched it all the way through. I've watched every single episode. I like the Reyes and Doggett stuff as well as the Mulder and Scully stuff. Um, and I like the reboot. I quite like quite a lot of those episodes. I will say the very last episode I watched, because I got a feeling there's been more, but I might have missed that. That was a very final episode, I think season 11, which was terrible. It was the worst episode of the X Files I've ever seen,
Right.
which is a disappointing way to end a series, frankly. But there
Mm.
were also some great episodes in those reboots, right?
Some things just should stop, right?
Yes,
This should
possibly.
just end.
I'd be, having said that, I'd be okay with an X Files coming back, but new cast, you know, new stuff going on, different
I think
dynamics.
I think that like we talked about, like there's like similar to Back to the Future, right? Like how good is it that those guys were like, as long as we're alive, you cannot remake Back to the Future.
Yeah,
Um, I kind of wish that happened more, to be honest. Like there's a point in X-Files where I feel like you guys probably could have called it there.
yeah,
And you know, it's that flash in the pan. They've hit the perfect. Everyone's the right age. It's the right setting and time period. And like you said, horror was a bit short in between, and it was just great. And then you know you're in season 11,
yeah.
and you're like, really, what are we? What is left to say that hasn't been said? You know,
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I think the format has still got some life in it in terms of it has to be a new creative team, it has to be new cast members. Leave Mulder and Scully alone. Just leave them alone. Just do something
yeah,
new.
just like I wish Star Trek would leave Kirk and Spock alone.
They can't help it. They can't
They
help
can't help it.
it.
They
Yeah,
know
but
that
it
people
was.
love it.
I
Yeah.
I'll just restate there really wasn't much horror when the only exception to that were the mini series, Stephen King stuff often,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
it probably being the most famous to that. But before that, Salem's Lot, which is more late 70s actually, early 80s. But there was loads of other Stephen King stuff, The Stand and things like that. But really, the X Files stood alone in terms of non-Stephen King horror. There was
Yeah.
on telly. So yeah, it was fairly terrific. I think
Nice.
we've kind of expressed we really like this show and gone
I think
through
so. I
all
think
the
next
seasons.
week we'll focus more on the
On the
episode. I
episodes.
think.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure we'll think of things we might want to talk about more general for the X Files, but
Yeah.
uh, I'm not sure we mentioned it, but this was a wonderful piece of writing in terms of like the character beats for Mulder and Scully.
Oh
Stuff like
yeah.
Mulder when he gets the hand. What's this? He's looking at the nest, and Scully's like, I think it's bar. He goes, "Is there any way I can get this off my hand as soon as possible without betraying my exterior cool?"
Yeah.
And Duchovny sells it. He sells it so
Yeah. He
well.
does sell it. And yeah, like whenever I hear like the whole Duchovny's not a great actor, I'm like, nah, man. He is, I don't care whether that's
Oh,
just
he's
who he
perfect for
is.
this
He's,
character,
yeah, he fits the character and the writers understood that.
and
And
they
I
play
think
to
that
it.
they played to it and the team as a whole works. It's that flash in the pan, like I was saying. And the way Gillian Anderson reacts, like you said, the fact that executives were considering, I mean, she's by far and away one of the best things about the whole show. Mulder's great, but I don't think I'd watch it without Gillian Anderson. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. One of the other things about the show I just mentioned very briefly, and we kind of doing a really perfect thing is Chris Carter got lucky in that he spotted really great writing teams.
yeah.
Consistently
The
good
guys
writing teams.
killed it. Yeah,
Yeah, Glenn Morgan, James Wong were a great writing team. Really worked well. And in fact, Glenn Morgan's brother Darren Morgan wrote some of the greatest episodes of the X Files, but he only wrote a few. But they are unbelievably good.
right.
It's like
Yeah,
hard to comprehend how good a writer he is, but he only does two or three, right?
yeah,
Because it must kind of burn him out because they are so good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, shall
yeah.
we kind of want? I mean, I don't see any point rating this episode. It's clearly
It's
that's
fantastic. Yeah.
fantastic. So I think we'll call it there. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. I'll look forward to next
Especially if we're
week.
coming back more X Files next time. We got
Definitely more
we
X
got
Files next
more
time.
to,
Yeah.
more to say then. Yeah. Okay. So that about winds up this episode. So to all our listeners, peace and long life.
And live long and prosper.